Did you know that in Russia, men die uncontrollably and it has nothing to do with wars? Do you really think the KGB is over? And what about the Russian mafia? Is it just something out of a movie? Welcome to Russia, a place where the mystery is as great as the territory. Today on Bello Mundo, you'll get to know a side of Russia that nobody likes to show. A country full of vices, secret plots, and deaths that raise more questions than answers. Want to understand what's really going on? Then come with us. Number 1. Location and geographical data. Russia, owner of the largest territory on the planet, impresses with its grandeur. With more than 17 million square kilometers, it connects continents, blends cultures, and spans centuries of history. It is a giant that occupies part of Europe and almost half of Asia, forming a bridge between East and West. This country is so vast that it covers 11 time zones. Think about it. The sun rises in Kaliningrad, in the far west, when it is already setting in the icy regions of Siberia, near Alaska. This geographical expanse brings landscapes ranging from fertile plains and dense forests in the west to frozen tundras in the north. In the south, mountains, such as the Caucasus, impose themselves, while the Lena, Volga, and Amur rivers cross the territory with force and constancy. The climate is also a roller coaster of extremes. Russia alternates between short summers and brutal winters that paint the country white. Can you imagine temperatures below minus 40 degrees Celsius? It's not for everyone. Number 2. Overview. And if you think Russia's geography is impressive, wait until you learn about its history. This gigantic territory was once ruled by powerful czars, went through a revolution that turned the world upside down, survived the Second World War, and, more recently, was the heart of the Soviet Union. Today, it is a democratic republic. At least the paper says so. But we know that's not the case, right? Most Russians live in the European part of the country, especially in cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. Meanwhile, Siberia and other more remote regions are almost like another world, isolated and icy, but full of natural resources. And that's where infrastructure comes in. Pipelines, railroads, and roads crisscross the country, connecting everything and ensuring that Russia is a key player between Europe and Asia. But what makes Russia truly unique is its culture. From writers like Tolstoy to composers like Tchaikovsky and the ballet that enchants the world, Russia has given the planet some of the greatest geniuses. However, behind all this glitter disguised as democracy, there are far less glamorous stories, which we will now explore. Number 3. Lack of freedom of expression. We start with a characteristic that seems to have become a symbol of modern Russia: control over anyone who dares to question the system. That KGB that many think is a thing of the past? Actually, it's just changed its name. Today it's called the FSB, but the objective remains the same: to monitor, silence, and intimidate. And the scope of this control is chilling. Journalists who dare to investigate corruption or conflicts such as those in Chechnya often disappear or end up dead. The case of Anna Politkovskaya is an example that cannot be ignored. In 2006, she was murdered after denouncing government abuses. Her story became a symbol of resistance, but it also showed the high price of challenging the system. And the repression doesn't stop with the press. Political leaders and activists also face, shall we say, very convenient fates. Accidents such as falling out of windows or mysterious poisonings are so frequent that they seem like a repeated script. Nikolai Glushkov, a critic in exile in London, was found strangled. Pavel Antov, a businessman who criticized the war in Ukraine, fell from a hotel window. And the most recent case, and perhaps the most emblematic, is that of Yevgeny Prigozhin. After defying the Kremlin, the plane he was on crashed in unclear circumstances. The list only grows, and the pattern is always the same. Any criticism of the government can end in a tragic and inexplicable end. Number 4. Censorship and political persecution. If freedom of expression is lacking, censorship is practically inevitable. And in Russia, control of information is a frightening reality. The TV stations, virtually all of them are under government control, broadcasting only what interests the Kremlin. Controversial issues? They simply disappear from the screens. And for those who think that social networks are an escape, it's not so simple. In recent years, laws have been created to block websites, monitor online activity, and even arrest people for posting content classified as extremist. Even Telegram, known for being a freer platform, has felt the weight of the state. It was banned for refusing to hand over user data and only managed to return after a lot of pressure. When it comes to political persecution, it's impossible not to mention Alexei Navalny. He is one of the best-known names in the Russian opposition, but his story is a real nightmare. Navalny survived a poisoning that shocked the world, but when he returned home, he was arrested, sent to an inhumane place, and, as expected, died under suspicious circumstances. And he is not alone. Many activists face arbitrary arrests, sabotaged election campaigns, and a relentless siege that makes it almost impossible to mount real opposition. The so-called national security laws are so broad that any criticism can be labeled a threat to the state. In culture, the scenario is no less oppressive. Theater performances, art exhibitions, and even books that touch on sensitive subjects are censored. And what about the internet? Roskomnadzor, a body that acts as a digital watchdog, decides what can and cannot be accessed online. It also forces technology companies to hand over user data, making it clear that even the virtual environment is controlled. Number 5. Health and education. Officially, Russia prides itself on having a universal healthcare system, but in practice, the quality of services varies wildly between the big cities and the more remote regions. If you're in Moscow, you might even find well-equipped hospitals. Those living in the Siberian countryside, on the other hand, can face a lack of specialists, medicines, and even basic infrastructure. The education scenario is not very different. There are renowned universities and well-respected technical schools, but much of the public school system suffers from a lack of investment, prepared teachers, and modernization. Add this to an ideological line that prefers to keep the population less critical, and voila, we have a youth that has little incentive to question or create innovative solutions. Number 6. Persecution of the LGBT community. Another heavy stain on this whole story is the treatment of the LGBT community. In 2013, the infamous gay propaganda law was passed, which basically bans any public display of homosexual relationships, especially if there are minors around, which translates into practically any public place. The result? LGBT people find themselves cornered. Many people in this group report daily attacks and threats, while the government pretends not to see. The laws, which in theory should protect everyone, end up serving to validate prejudice, punishing anyone who dares to talk about sexual or gender diversity. The consequence? Many choose to migrate abroad in search of a place where they can exist without fear. Others try to hide, living a clandestine life, even without committing any crime. It's the kind of thing that weighs heavily on the notion of individual freedom, that theoretically every democracy should have, but they are not the only ones to suffer. Number 7. Abuse and domestic violence. In Russia, even though women make up the majority of the population, patriarchal culture still dominates in many respects, and this is brutally reflected in the issue of domestic violence, which is a widespread problem in the country. To give you an idea of how serious it is, a study by the National Center for the Prevention of Violence in Moscow revealed that 1 in 3 women has suffered physical or psychological violence within the home. And the most disturbing thing? In a survey of 10,000 Russian women, almost 40% believed that a husband has the right to use physical force against his wife. But what's really frightening is how Russian legislation deals with this issue. Since 2017, assaulting a spouse or family member without leaving serious marks is no longer a crime. It is now treated as an administrative offense, punishable by a fine. In addition to physical violence, there are gender prejudices that are reflected in the pay gap, reduced access to high positions of power, and the culture that women take care of the home while men are in charge. Those who report abuse, including sexual abuse, can face indifference from the police, social judgment, and the threat of losing their livelihoods, since in many families the man is still considered the boss. Number 8. Addictions. And while we're on the subject of domestic violence, we can't ignore one of the major fuels behind this problem: alcohol. In Russia, drinking has been part of the culture for centuries, as emblematic as matryoshkas. To understand how profound this is, you only have to remember Mikhail Gorbachev's government in the 1980s, when there was an attempt to restrict alcohol consumption in order to increase the country's productivity. What happened? An underground drinks market exploded, and many people began to consume absurd products, such as perfumes and insecticides, instead of alcoholic beverages. This, of course, only made matters worse. And here's a curiosity that sounds like a joke. Until 2011, beer wasn't even officially considered an alcoholic drink in Russia. It was seen as a soft drink and could be sold freely, with no age restrictions. To be a real alcoholic drink, it had to have a higher alcohol content, like vodka, which is practically a national symbol. But this historical relationship with alcohol comes at a price. A study published in The Lancet revealed that around 25% of Russian men die before the age of 50 from alcohol-related causes, either illnesses or accidents. But alcohol isn't the only villain. Another vice that leaves a deep mark on the health of Russians is tobacco. According to the World Health Organization, WHO, Russia is among the 4 countries that account for half of all smoking-related deaths. Smoking is particularly common among men. 60% of them are smokers, compared to 23% of women. And many start at an early age, which only increases the risk of developing cardiovascular and respiratory diseases and various types of cancer. Number 9. Organized crime. Leaving the social sphere, let's delve into one of the most dangerous and dark sides of Russia: the criminal underworld. That image of the Russian mafia that movies love to exploit? That's no exaggeration. The so-called bratva is real, and reality can be even more intense than fiction. Its roots go back to the time of the Russian Empire, but it gained strength during the Soviet period and exploded in the 80s, taking advantage of the chaos of the collapse of the Soviet Union to expand around the world. No wonder the FBI classifies it as a criminal superpower. And the reason is simple. They are involved in everything, from drug and arms trafficking to money laundering and financial schemes so elaborate they would make any banker lose sleep. The most curious thing is how the Russian mafia operates. Unlike other organizations, the Bratva has a peculiar style, with a strict hierarchy and its own codes of conduct. The Vor Zakone, or thieves-in-law, are the legendary leaders of this organization, figures respected for following a set of quasi-religious rules in the criminal world. And if you've seen tattoos full of meaning in movies, know that this is also real. Each tattoo tells a story, whether it's a position within the mafia or the crimes committed. With the economic and political chaos that followed the end of the Soviet Union, the Russian mafia infiltrated legitimate businesses, influenced politicians, and even messed with the financial sector. And they weren't limited to Russian territory. Today, Bratva operates in various parts of the world, including the United States, Europe, and even Latin America, taking its criminal expertise to new markets. Among their most common crimes are drug trafficking, smuggling, money laundering, and extortion. But in recent years, they have specialized in cybercrime. Yes, the Russian mafia is a real powerhouse in the digital world. Their operations are so sophisticated that the authorities often only realize the damage has been done. And if there's one thing the Russian mafia does very well, it's maintain an air of mystery. The leaders rarely appear in public, preferring to act behind the scenes and keep a low profile. Even so, their names carry enormous weight, especially for those who dare to cross their paths. Despite global efforts to combat this criminal network, the Bratva remains as strong as it is adaptable. Whether controlling the underworld or influencing the financial upper echelons, they prove that tradition and modernity can go hand in hand in the world of crime. Number 10. Corruption, a state within the state. You can't talk about the dark side of Russia without mentioning corruption, which seems to be present in practically every layer of society. From bribing the policeman who stops you in traffic to million-dollar scams in the upper echelons of government and big business, corruption is almost a cog in the system. No wonder Russia occupies unenviable positions in rankings of perceived corruption. And the impact of this? Gigantic. Essential infrastructure, health, and education projects end up with diverted resources before they even reach their final destination. For the population, the reflection is clear. Hospitals without basic supplies, scrapped schools, and a constant feeling that nothing is really improving. As if that weren't enough, political repression makes it almost impossible to report these irregularities. Anyone who tries to expose corruption schemes runs the risk of being labeled a foreign agent or facing even more serious prosecution. This creates an environment where silence is the only choice for many. To outsiders, Russia may appear to be the scene of great cultural and scientific achievements, and that, of course, is true. But at the same time, it is a place where many voices are silenced, where transparency always seems out of reach, and where the weight of corruption stifles the potential for real progress. And so we close this journey through Russia's darker side. What did you think of this panorama? Were you surprised, or did you already have an idea? Share your opinion and send this content to anyone who likes to explore what lies behind the stories of famous places. Thank you for following along, and we'll see you on our next Bello Mundo adventure. Until then.